Jason Garrett, gone as offensive coordinator in New York. What are the Giants trying to do? Save their you know what? I'll talk about it here on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, folks? Here on Locked On NFL on a Wednesday. Thanksgiving, one more day, and we'll be ready to sit down and enjoy some football and eating a bunch of turkey. We thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day, because it's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Ride solo today, man. My man James Rapine is traveling, and we wanted to make sure we got this show out in due time and with good content. So safe travels to James Rapine, and we'll see him, of course, next week. You can always see him every day on Locked On Bengals. However, but for today, we're going to do it solo. We're going to ride. You're going to take a little ride with me here in my Locked On shirt. You know, I lost a few pounds. I couldn't get into it before. We're going to talk Jason Garrett. Then in segment number 2, we're going to talk those coaches who were hot last year that might not be so hot this year. Offenses that struggle. I'm talking about Eric Bieniemy, of course, in Kansas City, and Brian Daboll up in Buffalo. It seems like those two coaches were guys that people thought should have gotten jobs in the last cycle. What about guys that did get jobs? What about Staley out with the Chargers? He's got a little bit of time to redeem himself, but Arthur Smith, that looks terrible. So we'll talk about some coaches that got hired and some coaches who didn't, and to see if anything that you've seen about this year has changed those perspectives. And, of course, the power rankings are out, and we'll hit the power rankings in the third segment, but we're not going to bear the lead too much longer. We're just going to get right to it here on Locked On NFL. They must have been listening. They, meaning the New York Giants brass, must have been listening to all of the talking heads on the major networks today in talking about the New York Giants, or yesterday in talking about the New York Giants, because they were all calling for not only Jason Garrett to get fired, but they were calling for Coach Judge to be removed and Dave Gettleman, the GM. Folks wanted all of them gone, especially folks with rooting interest in the New York Giants. I think it was about right. I don't agree, though, with some of the sentiment that's coming out. Is like they're saying, why did they hire Jason Garrett in the first place? Well, when you're a head coach of a football team, it seems like if you fail, the next step is to go be a coordinator. That's not something that's out of the stretch of the imagination, because what he did in Dallas, he may just not have been a good head coach. Maybe, it means he couldn't concentrate on coaching the team and calling plays. We've seen it in the past where guys are better play callers, North Turner, than they are head coaches, North Turner. So it doesn't mean that guys, Vance Joseph seems like he's a better coordinator than he is a head coach. It's happened before, and it's not beyond the stretch of an imagination that guy could go and be a successful coach. I don't know, man. Sometimes when you look at these situations and you see coaches that don't appear to be good, players that don't appear to be good, sometimes you wonder which one is it. Of course, the team that I cover here on the Locked On Podcast Network, Jacksonville, they have their struggles right now, and they've had them in the past. And in the past, you didn't know whether it was the players, the support staff, the coaches, the quarterback. Having a bad quarterback can really make your team not look functional. Having a bad coach, sometimes you can hide it by having a good quarterback. If both are bad, then I think you have a huge problem, and you have to figure out and diagnose. You have to make sure that you don't just you don't just put a Band-Aid on it, But Jason Garrett is out in New York. I do think it's a move that had to happen, because Coach Judge probably has to save himself and to see if he can spark this team and do something down the stretch for those that are in charge to decide that he needs more time. Certainly, if they make this change and down the stretch, things seem to get better. And many times, some of these things, sometimes what happens is usually the head coach gets fired, and then things get better down the stretch. And you've seen situations where the ownership has been like, well, let's keep that guy. Happened in Jacksonville with Doug Marrone way back in, I believe, 2016, was it? It happened then, and then the next year they made a run to the playoffs. So it was fool's gold. It happened with Romeo Crennel in Kansas City. I recall it happening then. It almost happened in Atlanta with Raheem Morris once Mike Quinn got fired, but they decided to go ahead and reboot that whole thing. We'll talk about whether that worked or not. But in any event, the New York media will eat this up, and the New York media can make things happen by putting noise into the machine, and you've seen that happen already. So Jason Garrett is out. Personally, I think he's a bit of a scapegoat. I mean, going back to what I just said, I don't think he's necessarily great, but I think that quarterback needs, he has a lot to be desired, and so a lot of this has to fall on him as well. Injuries play a part in it too, but I think the three major parts on offense were the coordinator, the quarterback, and the offensive line, where you have questions about all three of them. And when you have questions about those three things for that particular team, or any team for that matter, but especially one that is in the media capital of the world, you're going to run into some problems where folks start calling you out. All right, so there might be a coaching change again. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. We're going to take a look at 4 situations, 2 where there were changes, where guys got jobs, and 2 where guys did not get jobs who folks thought they should. We'll take a little bit of a look back and a review and see at this point how that's all panned out. And we'll do it here as we continue on a Wednesday of Locked On NFL. We're back and better than ever. Who is we? We are Bet Online. That's right. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code Locked On. That's right, to receive that bonus. From basketball to football, baseball, postseason, which is gone by now, but the NHL is rocking. We just had boxing. We'll have UFC coming up. And all of your favorite casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021-22 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, and hopefully your podcasting starts with us here on Locked On NFL. This is your first listen every day. I'm Tony Wiggins, standing in the driver's seat and riding shotgun because James Rapine is busy traveling. So I took care of this today, and I hope you guys don't miss James too much. No, I'm just joking. That's my boy. But coaching changes. There are some that are anticipated. Some are already happening. I believe the Giants firing of Jason Garrett yesterday is a result of obviously their poor play, but it's also a result of someone shaking the tree and telling Coach Judge up in New York, you got to show me something before the end of the year. And one of the ways that it seems like he could do that was to fire their head coach. Some teams just have bad luck, man, when it comes to hiring and firing coaches. And I do believe the Giants' bad luck started when they fired Jerry Reese. He wasn't given a chance to fail after he made a couple of decisions, like with getting rid of Tom Coughlin and bringing in Coach McAdoo. He had won a couple of Super Bowls. And I think when someone is like that, you have to give them a little bit more time. They haven't been able to get that thing right. I've never been a big fan of Dave Gettleman with the way that he goes about his business. They do, however, have some draft capital coming up, so it may be an attractive job. It won't be an attractive job if that coach has to come in and keep Daniel Jones. I think they need to be able to have a clean slate for a coach to come in. Who could it be? At the beginning of this year, you could not have told me that Brian Daboll or Eric Bieniemy's stock would drop. Both guys were people who were at the top of my list last year to get jobs in the NFL, to get head coaching jobs. Of course, I have no understanding as to why Daboll didn't get hired, because the Bills' offense had showed so much promise. And their head coach has a defensive background, which means Brian Daboll probably has a lot more responsibility than a coach who is coaching under a guy who has an offensive background. Eric Bieniemy, I don't understand it. I'm not going to tell you that I do, but there's the thought that because Andy Reid is the head coach with an offensive background and is a pseudo play caller, that Eric Bieniemy wasn't doing much out in Kansas City. Now, I've always differed to that, is because that didn't stop Matt Nagy from getting a job. That didn't stop Doug Peterson before him from getting a job. And when Doug Peterson was in Philly, it did not stop Frank Reich from getting a job. So it seems like everybody gets jobs based on whatever it was they're doing. And when it came to Eric Bieniemy, it was just like, well, they want to move the goalposts with him. Unless Kansas City turns it around and starts scoring points like they used to this year, if you couldn't get a job before, it's going to be real tough now, because their offense has really, really struggled. They've struggled with being patient. They've struggled with turning the ball over, and they just haven't been that cheat code that everyone for so long says that they were. Everyone says that they're a cheat code. They're a cheat code. Well, they haven't looked much like that now. They're starting to get their groove and win games, but they're winning them in a different way. And I think that's by design, because that's what teams are forcing them to do. So from the standpoint of winning games before and blowing people out and saying, well, who couldn't call plays under that circumstance, to now, when they're not winning games the way that people are used to or accustomed to them doing, now the talk is, well, they look like they're struggling. So the bottom line is, anybody who wants to find a reason not to give Eric Bieniemy a job is going to have a couple of them to point to this year, and it does not make them right. Brian Daboll, I still haven't put my finger on what's going on up there. He comes from that tree of Bill Belichick, Nick Saban in the past, and you could actually see it in his play calling. I don't know if they have a couple offensive linemen nicked up, if the players aren't responding because they're reading those press clippings. I have no clue as to why they seem to be struggling, but for some reason they absolutely are. Will it hurt his chances of getting the job? Sure, and especially if they don't make a deep run into the playoffs, and it's starting to look like they may have to fight their way in, even under a 17 format, especially if multiple teams, if 3 teams can come out of the AFC North, then that's a problem, because now it only leaves one spot open, and maybe someone else out of the West can wake up and start winning some games down the stretch. It doesn't look likely, but it's possible. So what are the prospects that they'll get jobs this year? When you look at the guys that did get work, I'm not going to include Urban Meyer. I'm just going to include the 2 guys. Well, I can even include Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh is having a hard time in New York because I think the team is bad. And folks saying he looked like, he's over there and doesn't know what he's doing. I don't agree with that. I just think that he's pretty much trying to make lemonade with a bag of onions, and it just doesn't work. And I think he probably needs to be given a little more time. I'll give credit for the 2 wins that he did have because they beat 2 good teams. They beat 2 teams they weren't supposed to beat. And so when you look at that, I think you have to give him a little bit more time and a little bit more consideration. With Arthur Smith, the Falcons just look like they've gone backwards. And Terry Fontenot is going to have to answer for that. But they look like they've regressed. They look like they've just totally gone backwards. And after being able to fight early this season, it just seems like now all the fight they had is gone. And they play Jacksonville this week, and that's going to tell a story, a lot of a story about what the future holds for Arthur Smith and that gang, and how they're going to be able to proceed, though. But these coaching hires, man, they're not home runs. I mean, nobody knows how this thing is going to turn out. I think, talking about other guys on the hot seat, Brian Flores looks like he could be in a world of trouble. I mean, an absolute world of trouble. People are talking about the fact that Pete Carroll may be in a world of hurt, in a world of trouble. So, we're just going to have to see how this is going to go for some of these people down the stretch. It's hard. This is hard to do. We talk about it all the time. Coaching in the NFL is about more than your ability to call plays. It's about having an organization, having a strong staff around you, and being able, to know how to move. Urban Meyer has learned that. Urban Meyer has learned that as recently as just 2 days ago, where his chief of personnel, not his chief of personnel, his chief of staff is now leaving after 1 year. And there's talk that Urban Meyer may can his entire staff on offense and start with Dan Mullen as offensive coordinator, since Dan Mullen has lost his job at the University of Florida. You just never know how it's going to go with these coaching changes. I tell you what, I think the power poll is reflective of a lot of what we will know about what will happen next year. The power poll, our weekly power rankings, are out here on the Locked On Podcast Network, on the Locked On NFL. Our guys from around the league are the ones who created it. And you're going to figure out what that is, and we'll do it here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. I'm sorry, Locked On NFL. I'm so used to saying that. Locked On NFL on a Wednesday. If you haven't tried Built Bar by now, you are missing out. They say it's a protein bar, but it does not taste like one, because those protein bars are all waxy and chalky and just plain and hard to really consume unless you got a flavored drink to go along with it to wash it down. Built Bar isn't like that, man, because you're missing out big time if you haven't had one. It's 100% real chocolate, and when you bite into it, you know you're not eating something different than a protein bar. You're eating a protein bar, but it's really the texture, and it tastes like a candy bar. It's more of an experience, one that you'll enjoy. In fact, you'd swear you're eating something off the candy aisle and not off the health food aisle, because Built Bars are low carb, low calorie, low fat, low sugar, and very high in protein. So they pack a nice punch for all of you people trying to work out like me. Another great thing about Built Bar, there's so many mouth-watering flavors, including coconut, raspberry, mint brownie, coconut almond, my favorite, salted caramel, double chocolate, and cherry barcia. This month, Built Bar is coming out with a new limited time flavor about every 3 or 4 days. So check their website often. You don't want to miss out. Here's the offer for you. You go to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off of your order. That's right. It's built.com. Promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your next order. Do yourself a favor too, man, and follow them on Twitter at @bar_built for all the latest information, and see those beautiful Built Bars. That great packaging they come in too, man. I love that. I love the way something is presented, and they do a really, really good job at that. So it's built.com with the promo code of LOCKED15 for 15% off your order. Okay, man, we're rolling along here on a Wednesday on Locked On NFL. I got it right. I said Locked On NFL. I'm Tony Wiggins again. James Rapine is traveling, and we wish for safe travels for him. He'll be back with me next week. But for right now, we got it. I'm going to give it to you. You don't have to wait too much longer. Roll call, please. There it is. The Week 11 Power Rankings in the NFL. I'm going to start at the top, not the bottom. I'll go and just read them off to you if you're not watching on YouTube. I'll do it for you. The Arizona Cardinals are at the top spot at 9-2 after being number 3 a week ago. The Tampa Bay Bucks are 7-3. Of course, they're at number 2 after being at number 5 a week ago. The number 1 team from a week ago were the Packers. They didn't drop too far. They're at number 3. The Rams, after being 7th, have moved back up to number 4. The Chiefs, after being 9th, and this is after a very, very slow start that people still had them up there because they were off to a slow start, but nobody wanted to move them down. Well, guess what? The Chiefs have found they've got their footing on them at 7-4, and they're creeping back to the top of the power rankings. They're sitting at number 5. Number 6 is the Ravens. The Ravens seem like they're always 6. Number 7 is the Titans, and they seem like they're always hanging around there. And the news for the Titans is that if they make it to the playoffs, they expect that Derrick Henry has a good shot to come back in January. So it seems like if they could just hold on, they'll be all right. And with the division they're in, I'm sure they will be fine. The Cowboys are 8th after sitting at 4. 2 bad losses in the last 3 weeks. Check New England out. We did our podcast last Wednesday here on Locked On NFL, and I told you to watch out for the familiar team from the great Northeast, and they are right there in the top 10 and looking as dangerous as anybody in the league. The Bills are sitting there at number 10. Now, remember, when I said if the Bills are going to have a problem getting in, is because another team had to rise up. Right now, there are some teams sitting right behind them that could make a lot of noise and get the third wild card spot. And those teams, Pittsburgh is one of them, but they're way back at 18. That's not what I'm talking about. The next three teams in the power rankings, the Chargers, the Colts, and the Bengals and the Browns, that's 4 teams, 11, 12, 13, and 14. If Buffalo continues to falter and they have a hard game against the Patriots left, what will happen is even though there's 7 spots left in the playoffs, I mean, you almost got to assume that at the very least, even if Buffalo doesn't win the division, they're going to be one of those teams. But right now, the Chargers are right there. The Colts are behind them, the Bengals, and the Browns. So all within a half a game is a bunch of teams vying for like 3 playoff spots. We'll have to see how that goes. Number 15 to me is another surging team right now because they've sort of gotten themselves together, and that's the Vikings. The 49ers are 16th. That's exactly where I had them in my poll too. And you got to watch out for them because they've gotten healthy and they have a couple of good wins up under their belt, and they seem like one of those teams that's trying to surge at the end of the year. Let's go through the second half really quick. I won't keep you too much longer. 17 is the Saints. 18 is the Steelers. They probably should be a little bit higher. They played a game without Big Ben and got a tie with the Lions, but they could have been at this point 6-4 if Ben had played. The Raiders seem like they're on their way down. They're at 19. The Eagles are making a little bit of a noise and can probably raise some sand in the NFC a little bit, but they might have to win the division. Washington football team is 21. Carolina's 22. The Broncos are 23. The Seahawks are 24. That's one team I can't understand. They're 24 and they're 3-7. The Falcons are 25, Dolphins 26, Bears 27th. The Giants that I mentioned in the first segment are 28th. Jaguars are 29th. Texans are 30th at 2-8. Good for them. They moved up a little bit. The Jets are 31 and the Lions are 32. So there are your power rankings for week 11, and we'll see how they are affected by this weekend's games as we move towards Thanksgiving. I want to tell you guys that we thank you all for joining us here all the time on Locked On NFL. Make sure I get that right again. Here on Locked On NFL every single day, but particularly for us, we host a show. James and I host a show on Wednesday, and we always have a good time talking to you guys. All right, I want to remind you something. You're going on Bet Online, but before you do that, make sure you listen to the Locked On Bets podcast and make it your second listen every day. Your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. Make sure you guys take care of each other. You'll probably, you may, I don't know, depending on what the guys do, if you all are enjoying Turkey Day and don't have a chance to, we'll see you Friday, or you can listen to an encore edition of Locked On NFL anywhere where you get your podcast, because we're free on all platforms. Continue to take care of each other, man. And until next time, I'm Tony Wiggins from Locked On NFL. For James Rapine, who's not here with us today, but he'll be back. Take care.